Alrighty, in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody, to Loanology, the Jonathan Wells podcast. Today we are joined by a special guest. We've got Brent Wright in the building. How's it going, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure having you on here. So, yeah, Brent is a real estate agent from Macaulay, and you were a top producer for a couple years, right?
The last 6 out of 7 years, I've been the top producer.
There you go. So that's like a Tom Brady-esque run right there, huh? Absolutely. So, awesome. Well, yeah, Brent, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you were talking about getting on here and chatting about all things, real estate related. But give us a little bit of background of who you are, how you got the business, and give us some background.
Honestly, getting into real estate was an accident. Well, I'll try to make this story short. I bought a house when I was 20 years old. The lender put me in a really bad position. I thought I had a fixed rate mortgage. I thought I had this and that. I didn't. It was adjustable. I learned a lot about mortgages in the industry because of what I was put in. Thankfully, I didn't overbuy.
Sure.
Like with what they approved me for. I was 20 years old. They approved me for like a $280-something thousand house back in 2005.
Sure. Yeah.
That's like a mansion today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And I had an online business. It was crazy. Like, they were like, how much money do you make? And I told them about, right now I'm making about $7,000 a month. They were like, oh,
Right.
okay. No tax. I'm like, what? My dad's bought one home ever. He was in the military.
Yeah.
And, make sure you get a fixed rate mortgage. Okay. I want a fixed rate mortgage. Okay.
Right.
So closing the house. Yeah. One side of the loan was fixed. The other side adjusted.
Okay.
So it created a lot of stress, but I learned a lot just about how to navigate certain situations. And then I took the real estate school. I owned an online business for years, and I saw the direction that business was heading in. We did aftermarket lighting for cars, motorcycles, things like that. And I saw the direction that it was heading in with some of our main parts that we sold. So I was like, I need to do something else. So I wanted to get into rentals and flips.
Okay.
So I was like, let me take the real estate school so I can kind of learn some laws, learn some rules. Maybe I'll have first insight on foreclosures or things like that, because I really didn't know anything about it,
Mm-hmm.
Well, going through the school, I realized, it was kind of funny. I remember one day for one of the tests, I walk in the class and everybody's studying. And I'm like, you guys are studying? And they were like, yeah, we studied all night. Da, da, da. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Oh, shoot, man. I was like, I thought the book was to read along in class. And the teacher's like, oh, great, we'll see how this goes. And I passed with a 97. And so I just did really well in the class. And that's kind of what made me think maybe I will sell some real estate.
Yeah.
And then, Macaulay approached me. I talked to a lot of companies.
Sure.
And I just told them, listen, I didn't intend on selling real estate.
Mm-hmm.
I remember telling everybody, no offense, but my generation definitely got screwed over by your generation. So none of my friends can afford to buy a house right now.
Right.
So, but, I found when I first got my license, it was 2010. Right. Short sales were a big thing. People were in a lot of hardship. And what I found was I was able to help people navigate through a situation to where they could better themselves and maybe not ruin their credit for years.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of how it happened. But I didn't even mean to sell real estate, like I said.
Yeah.
I just wanted a license for foreclosures.
There you go.
Whatever. And here we are.
Yeah. So you got licensed in what, about 09, 010? Or
10.
Yeah. 09, 10. Okay, 10. Gotcha. Yeah, so you've been doing it this is year 14 then.
Yeah.
And, you've definitely had a really big run, especially with the last couple of years. I think that it speaks to, a lot of top producers that I end up talking with, they've kind of started their first few years in a specialized niche, like you were talking about, helping out with pre-foreclosures and things of that nature. And then those clients remember you and they come back. And now that it's been probably 5 to 7 years at least minimum since these people have gone through the last bits of that process, their credit's fine, they're ready to rock and roll now, and they're in a better position because of you, so they remember you for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and just giving people good information, like, it's really hard for a lot of people to take themselves out of the equation when they
Right.
can get paid, right? But there's so many times, like, I kind of look at myself as more of a consultant, because, like, when I was younger, I always wanted to be in the financial industry and, financial planner, things like that, stockbroker. And so sometimes, like, you'll find somebody is wanting to sell something for a really bad reason.
Right.
And then you can help them navigate that to where they can get to their end goal while still keeping the property, still keeping their expenses down, and that's what I do really good. And so, then you get referrals and people remember you.
Yeah, exactly. You're a professional problem solver. I think that's what a lot of the top producers are. They're problem solvers, and they're able to, like you said, help your clients take the emotion out of things by you bearing the weight of saying, hey, like, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. Whether you're selling your house or negotiating an offer on a property your clients are purchasing, that's obviously your job is to facilitate that transaction. Where a lot of people would get stressed out about that if they were doing it themselves.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, let's talk about this NAR lawsuit. I know that's that's what we wanted to get on here and chat about today.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? I know you've been kind of following this for a long time, right? Even before the settlements.
2019, the day the first one was filed.
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was March 19th of 2019, something like that. Maybe it was the 16th. So
how'd you find out about it first at that point?
So, like I said, I like the financials. So, the Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Wall Street Journal got an alert. It happened in the afternoon when it came out, and the very next day, it was funny because my phone rang at 6:30 in the morning. Usually, the one calling me at 6:30 is Ron, because I wake up early. He wakes up early. I watch CNBC, whatever. And he asked Brent, "What do you think about it?" And I said, "I see both sides." I was like, "But they're gonna lose."
Right.
So yeah, but nothing's really a surprise at this point.
Sure. So following that, right, the initial lawsuit was filed in 2019. We've watched, over the last, or you've watched probably more than I have, over the last, 5 years, this go through the court process and everything else. So what's your opinion on the lawsuit itself? What's your take on, okay, now coming out of this, here are the things that we're implementing. Like, what do you think, how this is going to change real estate as a whole?
So on the finance side, I don't think really much is going to change.
Sure.
It's more or less going kind of like in commercial. Like commercial doesn't have an MLS. Commercial doesn't have the NAR backing. Commercial doesn't have any of that. You write a letter of intent. The letter of intent, a lot of times they don't even have access to purchase agreements like the commercial brokers. So they'll just write up a letter on Word. And then there'll be a section in there, commission. And then it'll state the seller to pay the buyer's agent X percent.
Sure.
We already have forms like that in place under the exclusive buyer agency agreement.
Right.
So I don't really see anything changing when it comes to that.
Sure.
The benefit that I see is if you're a buyer's agent, well, there's a few things we're talking about, but like one thing is you're going to know what commission you're going to be getting paid versus being dictated by the listing agent what they're going to pay you.
Right. Yeah.
I think so many sellers are unaware that they might, say give us 6% or whatever, but then their agent's keeping 4 paying 2, and they don't realize that.
Right.
Um, so that's going to probably be eliminated.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
So I think that to your point, right? Like I'm an optimist. I always try to see the good side of changes and things like that, right? So I do believe what you're saying. It's going to bring transparency to what agents are getting paid from the seller if the seller is paying for the full commission, right? Obviously, after the lawsuit, the seller isn't required to pay the full commission. However, it is that realistically most things will probably be the same as far as that goes. That's kind of what the consensus is. I feel like. Um, that being said, too, like as a consumer, so if you're selling a home, you're going to know exactly what your agent's making and what the other agent is making. Not that you wouldn't have known that before, but it's going to be even more transparent than it has been because they're required now to disclose all of that information, just like they were before, but in different ways. I think as a buyer's agent, or if you're a buyer looking to purchase a home, you're going to see probably the most changes because you now are going to have to sign that document before you go out and look at homes with your agent. And you're going to know what your agent's making off of you before you go and look at your first place. And if they can't get all that money from the sellers, you're going to have to give some of that as well.
Right.
So, I know that like air quotes industry standard was 6% on listings. So each agent gets 3% is roughly what.
I would just say like this industry standard that they were talking about,
Right.
like, that is awesome because, yeah, I don't know, maybe they just read books or something.
Sure. Well, yeah. Well, so like I know that a lot of times, like again, agents, they be somewhere between 4% and 6% most of the time that I would see, right? And then you'd have some agents that they list for 4%, they're keeping 3%, giving 1% to the buyer's agent, right? Like that's where, now with this, coming out, it's going to be a lot more transparent. Probably won't see as much of that going forward, right? But I think that like, let's say you're a buyer's agent or you're working with a buyer, like what do you think is going to be? Because there's not necessarily an industry standard what people are going to be charged, but there's going to be an average, just like there's an average of what you pay in like loan fees, right?
Right.
What do you see the average being for fees to work with a buyer's agent?
Truthfully, probably the same between 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Like in some case, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
I've got multiple clients I've been working with literally for 3 years.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's finally getting reapproved now. The cool thing is because we've been working together so long, he's eligible for the first-time homebuyer program with the reduced interest rate.
Yep.
But like to think like if I were to say, okay, yeah, I worked with you for 3 years. I've gone to hundreds and hundreds of homes. I've
Right.
spent tons of money on gas.
Right.
I've spent tons of time.
Right.
I haven't gotten paid a dime.
Right.
To say, hey, I'll do it for a fraction of a normal, like, it's like, why would I do that?
Right. Yeah.
Like, why would I? Why?
Right.
So that's why I don't think, and a lot of people act like, a buyer goes out and looks at 3 homes and they buy a house.
Right.
But the majority of the time, the conversation starts a year and a half before they ever buy a house.
Exactly.
Like,
Yep.
So you've got hours and hours of phone calls and answering questions and guidance and giving them advice and helping them with credit, how to get their credit up, how to
Right.
do this. What's funny is people literally spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month
Right.
to credit repair people.
Right.
And it's like a good agent
Right.
is going to help you with that for free.
Right.
So
Right.
it's like they're worth the money. you know?
Exactly. And so I was pulling my phone here to look at, a calculator, right? So I think there's going to be a certain percentage of the market, just like in anything. Like you've had insurance change, so much over the last, 20 years. You had, after like with the, with the internet coming in as a major player, you've seen stocks change, like that whole industry of how to purchase stocks has changed. And I think you'll see real estate change too, like that, right? But let's say there's a certain percentage of the market that they are well qualified. They don't really need a whole lot of handholding because they're going to do this by themselves, and they're still going to use a realtor, but they're probably not going to be paying 3% for that agent, right? And those ones are usually going to be like, as a real estate agent, You show them a couple homes, as long as they're not too picky, they get under contract, they close out in like 3 weeks, you're done, right?
Yep.
And so those, I feel like you are going to have a, probably it's going to be less money, but it's easier to get them under contract, right?
Exactly.
Let's say the average home sale is 350 in our area, which is probably pretty average.
So last time I checked, in all of Northwest Indiana, it was 279.
Perfect. Let's do that. 279 times 0.03, right? So that's 8370, right? So if you're making 3%, you're making 8370. Now, off the top, for most real estate agents, you're paying a split to the company that you work for, because the company you work for has like insurances, for just like how doctors have malpractice insurance, like they have insurance, they have attorneys on retainer. They do a lot of stuff to protect the agents that work there. So let's say you're netting about 80% of that, right? Which is pretty much the industry average. I would think that you're getting 80% of that. That leaves you with 66.96. Now also factor in, you have yearly dues. You have your, you got to pay for gas, right? You got to do marketing. A lot of times you're working with these clients, like you said, for at least a year. I mean, most people that are buying now have been in my pipeline for at least a year that I'm working with, because they were the people that weren't able to get, into a home back in 2020. And, again, these agents have been showing them homes for, again, 3 years. So add that up, maybe 1 or 2 showings a week for 3 years. Travel time, gas time, your personal time, like what's your time worth to you, right? So again, everyone thinks you get them under contract in 3 homes, just like, Chip and Joanna Gaines, right?
I know.
And that's not exactly how that works. So, so I think that you will see a lot of, I think also too, what you're going to find out, you mentioned this earlier as well, you have people that are tire kickers, people that are approved maybe at lower amounts, that have a really bougie like goal for a home that they want, and so they're very picky, right? I think you're going to see realtors have to make like quick business decisions when it comes to the leads that they have, right? So I shot a podcast about this the other day, where you have, I usually call, there's 3 different types of leads. There's the good leads, qualify, and they're going to do what you say, right? Obviously, as a professional, you still, like, you're going to get their input, you're going to help them achieve their goals, but they follow your process, right? You have bad leads that just don't qualify, period, right? And then you have ugly leads that absolutely qualify, but they're going to push back at what you say. They're not going to believe you 100%. They're not going to follow direction. And they're going to be the ones that take you on a million showings before they buy their first place, right? So I think that realtors are going to have to be a lot better going forward about realizing like what those ugly leads look like, and either converting them to a good lead, or telling them, hey, like, I appreciate you, like, I hope you get it to a home. Maybe go talk to this person over here, right?
Well, the big thing too is now, like, you're gonna see that pushback up front, because you gotta have a buyer's agency exclusive agreement signed.
Right.
So you're gonna find out where the pushback's at there.
Yeah. Exactly. It's going to force those conversations. Right.
Which, I'm excited for that, actually, for that contract. We were talking about that. So
yeah, I'm excited for it too. I was like, I wish they had one for loan officers, man. Get shopped around as much.
Right. No kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying that because I've known, like, that's been a thing for, it's been a thing for forever. People just haven't implemented it, like that form, right? And so, I always tell agents, I'm like, why wouldn't you use this? If you're committing your time and your resources to that client, they should be committing back to you, at least for a certain extent. Maybe it's 16 showings. After the 16th showing, you say, hey, like, we both can terminate it at that point, because you might be done with them too, just as much as they might be done with you, right? So yeah, I think that as a consumer, the fear is that you're going to be locked in with using a specific agent for the rest of your life, and that's simply not true.
No. But it's gonna, like when we were talking earlier, what I really like about it, depending how it works out, but based on like NARS, how they proposed it, you have to have one signed prior to showing a home. So this is gonna sound bad, but every full-time agent, like, everybody starts somewhere in real estate,
Right.
but what it'll eliminate is the agent that has a full-time job
Right.
They have a client. That client is using full-time agents to show them the homes,
Right.
and then they're writing the offer with their friend that has the job.
Right. Exactly.
And so that will be done, which
Yep.
I was a part of at least 4 situations last year where that was happening.
Right.
In yeah, like actually the one agent who got kind of messed over. It was on one of my listings, a house I built. And, you know, I told him go to arbitration. You know,
Right.
like he didn't, but
Right.
it's just not fair. You know,
Right. Again, because like you said, like they're using your time to go look at the homes, and then they're writing that offer up with their second cousin who's twice removed. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and so one, like, again, this is gonna sound bad, right? But like personally, I believe that real estate is an all in or all out kind of thing. And so I totally understand and I feel for the agents that are dual career where they're in the process of switching careers, right?
Right. They're trying to.
Exactly, or trying to, right? And I think that, there's an exception to every single rule, right? But the people that we're talking about is mostly the people that just have their real estate license because they know that if somebody they know is looking for a home, they're going to make a couple extra bucks off of that, right?
Right.
And they're not usually the best at representing their client. They take forever to send the stuff in to me on the mortgage side, so it holds up my process too, right? I can't ever get a hold of them because they're at their work.
Yeah.
And so again, like I feel for the agents that are doing it the right way, but you also have way too many agents that just hold their license to make a few extra bucks off their family.
Right. And it's, like you don't want to be mean to them because everybody starts somewhere and you got to
Right.
have income because this is an industry like truthfully the majority of agents are flat broke.
Right.
Like I bet if you took our board and the stats, 80% of the licensed agents would make more money at McDonald's than they
Probably.
make selling real estate. Like once
Yeah.
you calculate the math and the time spent and the hours,
Yeah.
they would probably make a heck of a lot more money at McDonald's.
Right. No,
Especially
exactly.
now, I think they pay like $15 or
Yeah.
12 or 15 or what, and vacation and benefits. Like you
Yeah.
get none of that.
Oh yeah. Well, and like quick side note about that, I was driving for a bourbon raffle with a buddy of mine last weekend, and we stopped at McDonald's, and we were like, man, the prices are so high. And the guy that was working there was like, yeah, it's like because they just increased minimum wage in California to like $25 an hour or whatever, and so now they have to raise the prices across the United States to cover the loss leaders in California.
I'm not buying that. They're all franchises. They're not all corporate stores. It's a good way for somebody to just like kind of come up with an excuse to raise something.
Yeah, exactly.
They just want to. The problem is places want to keep their margins.
Exactly, that's what it is.
It's like they want to fight the margin thing, but margins now are higher than they've probably ever been.
Right.
Like going to the beginning of when McDonald's started to now, the margins are insanely high.
Oh yeah, because they're always looking at how can I increase the margins, how can I do all that? Because if you don't have a record month, of profits, then your job comes into question.
Well, and the problem, so I love stocks, I love the Wall Street, I love capitalism, but I hate corporate greed.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's all about satisfying the shareholders.
Right.
Nobody else cares. They got to keep the stock price up so they can leverage that stock. They can get bonuses with the stock. They can. So, yeah.
Yeah. I feel you on that. Like, again, huge finance guy. Love everything about, like what we have as a country in that way, except for like, the corporate greed. It's a little much, bro. It's a little much.
I mean, hey, some of these guys are making $11-12 million a year for showing negative gains.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. It's just back in, I think, like 80, that same guy was making like 600,000.
Yeah.
But they were making money.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Money, so.
Exactly.
Whatever.
So go back to this NAR lawsuit that we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, again, personally, where I see a lot of, these are my idea on or my thought on this. I think that you're going to have, again, a certain amount of people that don't want to work with an agent right away, right? They want to get their feet wet. They want to go see some things, and they know if they sign an agency agreement, they're locked with that agent for a specified amount of time. Right? It's not forever, but it could be 3 or 4 months. It could be a certain amount of homes that they go see, whatever. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you're going to see a lot more unrepresented buyers come through open houses.
Agreed.
I think that's going to be a major player over the next, like pretty much indefinitely at this point, right?
Right.
So as a listing agent, how do you prepare for that? Like, let's say a client comes through, they're like, all right, cool, I like this house, I'm unrepresented, I want to put an offer on it. What do you think that's going to look like?
Well, so there's a lot of unknowns right now.
Yeah.
So there could be either you enter a limited agency agreement,
Yep.
or the state will more than likely come up with a form. So, like right now, if you have a buyer and there's a seller that is maybe doing a for sale by owner, we have a contract for sale by owner agreement, basically letting the seller know we're charging a fee,
Right.
who's paying the fee, but we are not here to service you whatsoever.
Right.
We're looking out for the buyer.
Right.
You're on your own.
Right.
And so I can see them coming up with a form like that.
Yeah.
To where you basically, might have the buyer sign that if they don't want to pay a fee,
Right.
they don't want to pay commission or whatever. Have them sign a form like that. I don't think it's good for a buyer to go unrepresented.
Yeah.
Especially if something happens. But that's what I see happening.
Yeah.
Probably.
And I mean, I think that, again, a lot of this comes to, people tripping over dollars to save pennies, right? I think that again, like if you can negotiate a commission split, as a real estate agent. So chances of a buyer having to pay your full 3%, I don't think is very likely in most scenarios, right? But even if if you go without representation, period, like that's, just as bad or even worse, right?
Right.
Because like you said, God forbid something happens, like you want to be able to have had an agent in your corner negotiating for you to help you get the best deal, to help you figure out all of that. I think possibly where you could see some things happening is, like, we don't use attorneys a lot in Indiana compared to Illinois where everyone uses an attorney.
Right.
I think you will see some like either flat fee buyer's representation, like buyer's agent's representation, whether it's like, how you have like the flat fee listings or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see somebody say, hey, like go to open houses, go look at these places. When you're ready to write an offer, talk to me. I'll fill out the contract for $1,000 and I'll negotiate on your behalf for $1,000, right? I don't know if that's exactly what you want, because again, they're not tailoring everything to your needs. They don't really understand you. They're just writing the contract and doing that. Or the listing agent's going to refer that client out to an attorney. Say, hey, Mr. Attorney, you take care of this client, represent against us. And then that way we're like, I'm covered, my seller's covered. I don't have to worry about this buyer coming back to me and saying, oh, I wasn't offered representation.
Right.
I think that's where, you'll probably see some of the market go as well.
Oh, for sure. 100%. So, which there's going to be a lot of cool things that come out and things that people do, and it's how are they going to do it. But is every house going to necessarily have an open house? Is every house going to have, you know what I mean?
Right. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like if you're a seller, right? I know sometimes sellers push back on open houses, but now as an agent, you're telling your seller, like, if we don't have an open house, we're not going to have anyone come through that's not like, I mean, there's going to be people that are represented by agents that are coming through, but they're probably going to try and get a commission from you. They're going to, we could open up so much more eyeballs and activity if we have an open house.
Right. Which now, like, open houses make sense, but if you
Right.
go back to 2010, 11, 12, nobody went to an open house.
Exactly.
Like, nobody went. Like, even in 14, 15, 16, nobody went. Maybe
Right.
a nosy neighbor.
Right.
But with the lack of inventory on the market,
Yeah.
more and more people are starting to go to open houses, which is really good. Now, like, open houses were good in new construction subdivisions,
Right.
Because like you'd feed off of that, and then maybe they'd build or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, so I definitely see open houses being a priority.
Oh yeah.
It's something I've been tossing around, like even doing something short term, like during the week for like an hour or two here and there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're going to see like I think you'll see more open houses for sure. I think open houses are more important, like more viable now than they ever have been.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point as well, like I think that even doing them during the week, like as a real estate agent, you could work from pretty much anywhere.
Right.
So if you have a listing and let's say your client's out of town for a week, I would probably work out of their house every day that week.
Mm-hmm.
Have an open house, maybe not keep it open the entire week, right? But have a couple hours each day in the afternoon.
Right.
Work there from 4 to 7 each afternoon, right? Obviously have life balance in that too, but take a couple days, do that. And so you're able to get more people through there and maximize their time while they're out on vacation. You have that all handled.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a viable option for sure. What else, man? I think that, how do you think agents are going to, because as a seller, you can still offer a commission to the buyer's agent, right?
Yeah.
At post lawsuit.
You can't advertise it in MLS.
Exactly. You can't advertise it in the MLS. So how do you think, like, somebody's going to, how do you think they're going to communicate that unless a buyer's writing up an offer on that property?
It's so, from my understanding, you can have it on your website. You can have it anywhere but the MLS.
Sure.
To me, the simplest would be in showing instructions.
Sure.
Somebody schedules a showing, they get the instructions how to enter the property, and by the way, blah blah.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, to me, it doesn't really make sense for a seller to necessarily just offer one unless it's a bonus.
Right.
Because the buyer is still going to have the exclusive agency agreement signed. The agent's still going to write the commission in regardless what that seller says.
Right.
So it's just kind of like a wasted step.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just how I kind of see that.
Do you see in, like, let's say, just to throw out an example, let's say there's a townhome in St. John that's listed at $350, right? I'm talking like hot property. This home's going to sell like within days, right? Do you see that seller not like being willing to pay anything on the buyer's commission and still get that property sold?
It
super
depends
quickly?
if it's a cash buyer or what. Because, like,
Sure.
for a cash buyer, like, for them, it's like, it's a little different if you're a cash buyer.
Sure.
Right? Because you don't have the expense of the monthly payments and things like that.
Right.
So, like, I could see in some cases like that where they pay for it.
Sure.
That's why I really think it's just going to go like commercial. Because, like, I've seen in commercial where the seller pays 1.5%, the buyer's going to pay 1.5%.
Right.
The seller to pay this. Now, in multiple offer situations, it's going to get interesting.
Right.
At that point. But, I mean, it just really depends on the situation of the buyer.
And that's where I think that, we talked about this, I think offline before we jumped on here, about when you were listing homes back in 21 and 22, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about, what are, like, look at the terms, don't look at the price, right? Especially when it comes to multiple offer situations, because you're still going to have an appraisal unless you're paying cash, and all that stuff too, right? So let's say, I feel like what you could probably see is people offering, like, let's say it's listed at, so home's listed at 500. They're like, all right, cool, we'll pay 500, but then you're paying for our real estate representation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll pay you 500 minus the representation costs, and we'll pay that out of pocket, right?
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. You're netting the same as the seller, but but at the end of the day, like, the
that
math
would
still
work on
works.
cash.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
they have the cash versus the finance.
Exactly. Because if they're cash, yeah, like to your point, exactly. Like, hey, you're netting the same regardless. So, and this is a cash offer. I don't care if someone is offering 510 that's financed. Like, cash offer's gonna close out in 2 weeks, no appraisal, get it done, right?
Now you might have like, you might go into situations where somebody's like, "Hey, I'll give you 510,
right?
Because we want you to pay 2% of the agent, and we're going to pay the other half."
Right.
And then they'll maybe put like a appraisal um,
Like appraisal gap or whatever.
yeah, like the
Yeah.
appraisal gap formula. It's going to get interesting, and you don't really know. I personally don't think much is going to change,
Right.
right? Because like I just think most of the time the buyer's going to say this is to be paid for by the seller, like the buyer's agent obligations to be paid for by the seller at closing.
Right.
You know, but you might have to get creative at times, especially multiple offers. But most of those buyers are going to be in the same situation unless they're cash.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, like, especially like first time home buyers, which is like if you go pre-pandemic, I don't know what it's at now because I haven't seen anything, but in a while. But like in 2016, I think it was, the average family didn't even have $400 in the bank in case of an emergency.
Right.
In 2019, the average family didn't have over 700, like, and I'm saying 70% of families didn't have over $700 in case of an emergency.
Right.
If they don't have $700 in case of an emergency, how are they going to pay a commission?
Right. Exactly.
You know, so at the end of the day, like, I don't think this is the settlement that certain people wanted.
Right.
And so now we're going to go into hypotheticals, so I got to be careful.
Sure.
But I don't think any of this was ever intended on right or wrong.
Right.
I think this was intended to bankrupt NAR, to break up MLSs, because other companies in Wall Street has been coming for real estate forever.
Yeah.
They want to monetize the listing side of the business, and
Right.
they can't as long as we exist.
Right.
And there's multiple companies that want to do that.
Right.
And they just, you know, they want to automate everything. Like, just think of like industries.
Right.
Right? Like,
think of like Carvana.
Yeah, Carvana, or
You put the
travel
token in.
agents.
Exactly.
How many of those do you find now?
Exactly.
You find a few here and there part time.
Yeah.
You know, but the difference is these companies look at this and they see the money that's there, and you know, buying a house is not going on vacation.
Right.
Where you spend $3,000 and you're like, oh great, like that was like, I don't want to go there again.
Right.
Or, oh my gosh, that was the greatest thing ever. Buying a house is like, okay, I'm buying a home. This is an investment.
Right.
It's now, because of interest rates, wages, inflation, the value of homes.
Right.
It's the most expensive purchase
Oh,
in the
yeah.
history of America.
Oh, yeah.
That you're making.
Yep.
And you're telling me you don't want advice? Like, come on. Like,
Right. And I think that, like, you know, tech and, you know, Wall Street companies, they can change a lot of industries, right? And I think that we have to respect the fact that they have the power to do a lot of things like that, right? At the same time, which I know we both do, but at the same time though, like, to your point, real estate is so different because it is the biggest asset anybody's ever purchased. A 1% mistake on most homes is going to cost that buyer at least $2,500 to $7,000, right? And that's a 1% mistake, right? Think of a 10% mistake, 25 grand to 70 grand, right? And so that, like, good example, one of my best friends bought a place that was for sale by owner back in 2019. He had an agent that represented him. The agent negotiated a deal where he got paid by the sellers. And my friend, the home was listed at like 125 in Hebron on 5 acres, and he got it for like 115. It appraised for 150, and then 2 years later, when he did a refi, it was worth like 220.
yeah.
You know, and so, you know, essentially, like, if you're not using a professional, the chances of you missing out on a lot of cash, whether you're a buyer or a seller, is the chances of that are astronomically high, right? And it's hard to have somebody who's an expert if it's, you know, like if I invest with E-Trade, I'm not talking to an E-Trade expert, right? Like, nobody from E-Trade's calling me.
No.
I'm just doing everything myself, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not paying a whole lot for it.
Call people.
You can.
They'll charge you. But,
Exactly.
But how much does that person actually know?
Exactly, right? And they don't know anything about my situation. They only know about the stocks that I have with them, which is like, in my E-Trade account, it's like It's like the first Roth IRA I ever put in there, and I was like stopped being able to contribute to a Roth IRA shortly after that.
Actually, you're not.
Oh well, back
I'll
to our
tell
Roths,
you.
right?
Well, no, you can do. Are you self-employed?
No,
You're not.
I'm on a W-2.
Oh. Well, open up an LLC, and then you can do a solo 401k, and I
There we
think
go.
you can put. I think it's like 20,500
Okay,
into a Roth IRA,
gotcha.
and it's unlimited income.
Okay,
So it's somewhere around there. I'm not a
sure.
financial advisor. I don't know what the disclaimer is needed,
Yeah,
but look into it. But yeah, because I learned that years ago. Because that's like one thing a lot of financial advisors will never tell anybody.
right,
They tell everybody the simple stuff like SEP,
right,
Roth, this. They don't tell
right,
you how you can have the deferred side and the non-deferred side,
right,
and how income doesn't necessarily matter because you can be maxed out. And then if
right,
you do this, you can add a spouse to it,
right,
and you can match them.
right.
You know, so
And yeah, and so to bring that point home, right? Like you obviously know a lot about that stuff, but the guy from E Trade isn't gonna might not know that stuff, right? But also is not gonna know how that pertains to my situation because they're only seeing a very small portion of what I have total, right?
exactly. Yep.
And so same thing with real estate. Like, I don't know if I can like say names or whatever, but like, a certain
Surfing might leave names
yeah,
out.
we'll leave names out because I'm not going to pay for post production to bleep it out. So, so there's companies out there that, like you said, they're like, hey, we'll take care of your listing, we'll negotiate everything, we'll give you a cash offer sometimes, right?
Right.
And if we give you a cash offer, you could sell straight to us. Well, if they're paying you cash, they're going to go list that home later, and they need to like be able to make a profit off of that,
Mhm.
and they're still going to pay somebody like that's acting as a listing agent to negotiate on their behalf, do everything else. So you might as well do that yourself and make the extra money.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Crazy.
it is crazy, but I'm excited to see what happens. I think that you'll see realtors always be around, but I think that the dynamic is going to change. And again, I think that a lot of this is I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Some would say that I am, but I don't think that I am.
Right.
Um, I think it comes back to they're really trying to put out, in my opinion at least, or it just feels this way. They're trying to discourage small businesses, like the moratoriums on rent. Like they're trying to discourage mom and pop investors.
Oh, dude.
Now with the real estate thing, they're trying to discourage people that use real estate as like they don't want to work for a corporation. They want to do their own thing. They want to be self-employed. Realtors, I would imagine, are a vast majority of people who are self-employed are realtors. They're trying to push that out.
There's a good percentage, yeah. Well, it's money, and that's why, like, back in 2019, when that was filed and we had the conversation at 6:30 in the morning, there's three of us on the phone, and I said, we're going to lose.
Right.
It was like, they've already lost. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, there's two reasons why I say that. One, like I gave the example of, you, Mr. Seller, all right, say I sell your home, you're going to pay a commission. I'm then going to take that commission and pay another agent to negotiate against every aspect of your home.
Right.
Price, condition, everything. So explain to me how that's not some form of antitrust. And then the second part of it was Wall Street has more money than ours does.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Because, and it's sad to say, and I'm not a political guy. I'm very independent. My parents taught me to be a critical thinker, so I'm not going into politics.
No, of course.
Like
yeah.
But everybody in America that's a normal citizen knows for a fact that the more money you have, you can get a law changed.
Yeah.
You can get judges appointed. Judges are appointed position or elected position.
Yep.
You can do a lot.
Yeah.
If you have the money.
Oh yeah.
Well, Wall Street has the money.
Yep.
That's why I think the worst scenario for with what I believe was actually going on,
right,
is this settlement,
right?
Like for the entities that I think were coming after us.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it's kind of funny. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, so like, because with NAR, you have Their settlement's what, 411 million? Is that what it is?
418 for all of them. But then
Yeah.
remember, they just lost for like $1 billion in Missouri,
Oh,
but
okay.
it could be up to 5 point something billion.
Gotcha.
But that's also part of the settlement. So, yeah.
So like, because again, I know they're like they have a structure to repay it over a certain amount of years
4
and all
years,
stuff.
yeah.
So I know that NAR is obviously it's the National Association of Realtors. Everyone pays their real estate dues to NAR, so they do have cash that's coming in.
Mhm.
But to your point as well, like do you think that they're going to be, how likely do you think they're going to be bankrupt? And also, don't they have a lot of people on the boards from some of these companies too?
Yeah, from my understanding, they do. So, I don't think they'll be bankrupt now. Like as long as the settlement goes through. But
Yeah.
I the reason why I said what I said, like companies, is I years ago, because I know how to be the most cutthroat business guy if I had to be,
Right.
which I'm just not that guy, so I never want to be that guy.
Right.
But how would I, if I wanted to become something and get rid of my competition, how would I do it? I would tear them apart from the inside out.
Right. Exactly.
And so it's been happening gradually and gradually.
Right.
And then if you just look at all the lawsuits and how they line up, that's what was happening.
Right.
But, we'll see what happens. Time's going to tell where
Yeah.
everything goes. So,
Yeah.
the thing that matters is, people are going to buy homes regardless of what, but because everybody needs a place to live. The question is who's going to be the person to help them?
Right.
Exactly.
100%.
Because could you seriously think about this? Could you imagine buying a house almost like you buy a cell phone?
I couldn't
Half those people don't even know the things the cell phone does,
Right.
let alone terms, the legalities.
Right.
I mean, that'd be weird.
Yeah.
You want somebody that can help you.
Exactly. And it comes back to the whole I feel like there's that I don't know if it's like a essay or whatever you would call it, but there's the whole you'll own nothing and be happy. I know you've heard about that, right?
Someone said something about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that much about it. But.
Okay. Well, it just essentially the synopsis of what I've heard about it is we're just keep getting pushed further and further down this road of large companies owning everything.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And I'm what do you it's not capitalism, it's a free I love the free market society where everyone has the ability to go out and do what they want to do, right? And make and be in business. And obviously yes, there should be some governmental regulation around how you treat people in when you're conducting business, right? For sure. However, I feel like now everything's becoming more monopolized. The
100%.
further and further down we go, and it's and then you have my generation complaining about livable wages, which to a certain degree, 50 grand a year is not shit anymore.
It's not. Dude, I've argued this in. I don't want to get into politics.
Yeah, no, you're good.
But no, I've said for years. I had a conversation. I've had a lot of conversations, obviously, but
Yeah.
so I've got a theory.
Yeah.
Okay, and I went down a rabbit hole during COVID.
Sure.
Right, we're all sitting around. It's March of 20. The world's getting ready to shut down April 1st or whatever.
Right.
There's a group of buddies. We talk almost every morning, stocks, whatever.
Sure.
Not like any of us are multi-millionaires off the more long term. But
Yeah.
Just talking about where we think things are heading or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, all right, so we're going to go to the COVID time, but then fast forward to that. In 2015, I remember telling Ron McCauley at a dinner, it was the first time I ever sat next to him. It was at one of the top agent
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
And he happened to be at our table. My wife and I were there. And Ron was sitting next to me, and everybody's, just cackling. And he asked, he said something, and I just made the comment, I already see the next housing crisis. And
Right.
he's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, it's going to be interest rate based. And he's like, huh? And at the time, you could have bought, as an FHA buyer, you could have bought, because PMI wasn't for the life of the loan yet. That didn't go into effect until 16.
Right.
Um, if you were an FHA buyer making $60,000 a year, you could afford a $325,000 house with 3.5% down, as long as you had minimal debt.
Right.
Which was the majority of people working at the mill.
Right.
But then, like I said, the issue is when the interest rates go to 6.5%, that person's not going to be able to sell that home to a colleague, let alone afford to buy it from himself.
Exactly.
So that's going to be the issue that we play with. And then he said, how do we stop it? And I said, well, the only way to stop it is wages have to go up.
Right.
Now, during COVID, I go down another rabbit hole, and interest rates go to nothing.
Right.
I'm like, this is only going to make it so much worse when the interest rates go up on the affordability side.
Yep.
And so I tracked the Fed's fund rate with minimum wage and home values. And so all three charts kind of line up together.
Sure.
And so, because you can't really track like a wage, like at least I couldn't find anything on there. The
Right.
only thing that was like tracked was minimum wage.
Sure.
And so, like in 1945, the Fed's fund rate hit like 1.71% for the year average.
Right.
And minimum wage was 30 cents. From 45, because really inflation started back in the 40s.
Right.
After the 30-year mortgage was created, World War II, everything like that.
Right.
The economy was booming. It was firing on all cylinders. Like, nobody talks about that. They talk about the 80s, but really the inflation game started back then. And from 45, 46 all the way to 81, that's when they stopped inflation. That's when, I forgot who the Fed chair was, but they actually brought the Fed's fund rate temporarily to like almost 20%.
Yeah.
And the year average was like 15.7% or 15.75% for the year.
Sure.
And they put the kibosh on inflation. Well, wages in that period of time grew 767%. Minimum wage did. So from 81 till 21, minimum wage grew 115%.
Yeah.
And I would have conversations with guys like as the interest rates are starting to go up, and like people were like, "Oh, you can't find anybody to work," like because they would just walk off the job and like deal with it. Whatever,
right.
And I said, "Well, the power is now starting to leave the companies, and it's going back to the people."
Right.
And he's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "No." He's like, "People can't afford it." And I was like, "No." I was like, "The days of the companies making all the money and the employees making nothing."
Yeah.
They're starting to slip. I was like, prior to the 80s, you didn't have this wealth gap where CEOs were making. I remember when the E. coli thing hit, Chipotle Mexican Grill, the CEO was making like $14,000 something per hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the average employee was making $750.
Right.
And I get it's food, it's a kid's job, it's just that's what everybody likes to say, but still it doesn't matter. Like, who needs to make that much money per hour owning a food chain?
Right. And I even get too, like if you're running, if you're the CEO of a food chain, right? Sure, you're gonna have bonuses off of the profits that you're making or whatever. I get that. I understand that. I'm not complaining about that. But where I'm complaining at is the entry level positions, for or even, let's just say for example, like you're a manager at Chick-fil-A or at Chipotle, right? Like,
dude, it's like
what are you making?
$15 or $10 for a sandwich now.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. Like,
for a sandwich.
I go to Chipotle, and it's like I'm getting the regular bowl that I've always gotten, and it's like it used to cost me like $8, which I still thought was outrageous when it was $8. By the way. Right. Because I can make this at home for like $5, but now it's like exactly, and now it's like $12 or $14. My girlfriend wanted it was like morning or whatever, and she's like, "Hey, can you go get me a coffee at Big B?" And I'm like, "Sure." So she's like, "All right, I want a coffee and I want like this sandwich." I'm like, great. So like, I'll just double it up. I'll get one order for both of us.
$20.
26 effing dollars, dude.
Dude, I would have said cancel that.
Yeah, I'd have been like, nah, we're done. Like,
coffee. I got coffee right here. I was like, man, I got a gift card now. I'll send you a
yeah,
gift card. I'll bring some coffee with me. Yeah, but so the guy, and I told him wages haven't kept up, and he's like, no, they have. And I'm like, okay, so
Right.
I reversed it on the client.
Yeah.
And it's a buddy of mine's dad.
Sure.
And this buddy's in finance, and so like we have some really cool conversations. You know?
Oh yeah.
And I tell him like, well, wages haven't, and so I'll ask him like, all right, here, you bought your house that we just sold in what, 84? He's like, yeah, and I was like, okay. He worked at the mill forever.
Right.
I was like, if you don't mind, what were you making at the mill when you in 84?
Right.
Like when you bought your house on a 40-hour work week. I don't want to know overtime.
Right.
Just like ballpark, what were you making? And I want to say he told me like $34,000.
Sure.
Okay, a year. He bought the house for 52.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And I was like, okay, so what were you making when you retired? Again, 40 hours, no overtime. I don't want to know about any of that.
Right.
And it was like 75. And I'm like, so you're making 110% more after 40 years.
Yeah.
With pay raises.
Right.
And different, not just pay raises, right, like inflation raises, but like level raises.
Right.
Going from like, okay, you just started to
right.
this tier, because I think they have like 3 or 4 tiers or whatever.
Yeah, because you could go, exactly, you're changing positions on the way up too, not just cost of living raises, 100%. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So, and I'm like, so you're making about 110% more. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, so if wages kept up with inflation, why is it I just sold your house for $260,000 in December of 20 when I should have sold it for $115?
Right.
And
exactly.
He's like, oh gosh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But so that the economies could fire on all cylinders from the 80s,
right,
interest rates have always gone down to keep life affordable.
Right.
Whereas prior to the 80s, everything kept going up, so because of inflation.
Right.
So you were forced to pay more for the employees.
Right.
That they, because if you can't afford to work and live, while you're working for somebody, you're not going to work for them.
Right.
You're going to go get another job.
Right.
And so you get paid more money. And that's what happened back then.
Yeah.
And then it's like we got stagnant, and now I feel like we're on the reverse side of it. We're going to be going up. I feel like, personally, truthfully, I feel like everybody's next home is going to get more expensive.
Yep.
From the 20s to the 80s, you didn't just sell your house if you had a kid. You
right.
did in addition to it. You added on. You
right.
borrowed less money at a higher rate than all the money.
Yep.
And that's where I feel like we're heading.
Yeah.
We're there. So buyers are always going to be buyers because it makes sense to own a house.
Right.
There's always the benefit of owning the house. So that's not going to change. It's going to be the inventory that's going to be the issue.
Right.
For years to come.
Oh, yeah. And I think that you're going to see, like, as the baby boomer generation starts to die off, which, again, I think they're one of the longer living generations, too, just with the, modern medicine that's coming out and things of that nature. But as they start dying off, I think you will see more real estate open up because they've downsized. They own a lot of the real estate right now, too.
Right.
You're going to see a lot of wealth transfer down to younger generations. So I think that's going to help out a little bit too.
I'm already seeing it though.
Yeah.
So like, I've had numerous people I went to, boomers that passed away, and instead of selling the home, a nephew, a grandson, well, not a nephew of the boomer, but like buying a home using gifts of equity, things like that.
Right.
I facilitated, did the paperwork and things like that for a few of them.
Sure, yeah.
And so you're starting to see that. I feel like when it goes to the housing side of the cycle, right? I feel like right now we're like in 1950.
Right.
And so like, because like everybody thinks the housing market's going to crash, and it's like, dude, the housing market is not going to crash. It's not 2008. Everybody remembers 2008. That's not going to happen again. Loans aren't the same. Like none of that's there.
Right.
It's like if the interest rates dropped to 5% today, every house on the market would be gone immediately with multiple offers.
100%.
And
100%.
then, like, but you go to 5, that's not low enough to get the guy that's at 2 to sell his home.
Exactly.
You know, because not only would he be selling his home high, now if he's going to retire, he might do it.
Right.
You know? But yeah,
And I think that too, like what they're, what they could be doing as well. And again, I don't know, like, I'm not one to say that the government's planning a lot of stuff or anything like that, right? But one thing that like I could see happening is they're continually keeping rates because they talked about rate cuts. They still haven't done a rate cut yet this year. They're pushing it to they're keep pushing the can down the road further, but they're teasing like, hey, we're gonna do this, but okay, not yet. We're gonna wait a little bit longer.
Well, those are analysts saying they're cutting rates and they're
Right.
speculating. 'Cause the Fed's been very, very, very honest. Like,
Right. I think what they could be doing too is potentially waiting for more new construction inventory to hit the market. Potentially.
Yeah, as long as like
as soon as they cut rates, to your point, I mean everything's going to be sold.
Everything's going to be sold, but the hard thing is, so like I build a little bit too. I build like one home at a time because I'm not trying to go in debt or anything crazy.
Right.
I mean, I could do more, I guess, if somebody had a construction loan. But so there's not the subs. Like, even when I was a kid, in elementary school, middle school, high school, you have to go to college if you want to be somebody. You have to go to college, do this. Like, so there's not people in the trades.
Right.
Like,
oh, yeah.
So I'm
not at all.
The house I'm building now, out of the excavators, there's one guy that works for the excavation company that's probably under 40.
Right.
I think he might be in his 30s.
Right.
Electricians. There's one guy that's my age. I went to school with him that works for the electrician. Yep. The framer I went to school with, so he's he's older than I am, so he's probably 43. There's no 20-year-olds out there.
No.
They're all going to college. They're all doing this. They're all getting the office jobs. So you can't build homes without people to build them.
Right. No, exactly.
So we need to kind of get people, in my opinion, like they need to go more into the trades and things.
Yeah, and I think even too, like like you said, with that, like I'd love to see more people getting in the trades that are self-employed.
Right.
I'd love to see, obviously, I don't know, like I think that the whole your example previously, where the guy bought the home in the '80s and sold it in the 2020s, his income only went up 110% over, what was that, 40 years?
It was literally a 40-year span.
Yeah.
It was 36.
Whereas if you're self-employed, the more value that you bring to your client, the more you can charge.
Right.
And obviously, I'm not saying if you're going to go be in business and be, do that, like you're not going to make $1 billion a year, but you can make 150, you can make 200 if you're really good, and you have a crew and you're doing that type of stuff.
Yeah, everybody needs everybody has what they're comfortable with and what they like, and so that's fine. But my point was just that wages haven't kept up.
Right.
That's why I personally think, like, how do you get wages higher? Okay, right. How do you get wages higher, and how do you increase taxable income? How do you wages higher? You force wages higher through inflation.
Right.
Right. Things cost more. I need more money to live. I got to get paid more. The federal government doesn't make money when companies are holding $100 billion in cash in a bank account.
Right.
The federal government, the states, local municipalities, they get paid when people have money.
And they buy stuff, and they pay sales tax, and they pay property taxes because they're owning a home.
And they're buying things, they're going out to eat because people spend money, right?
Right. Exactly.
But look at you remember what? So this is 4-3. I think in 2022, was it 2022? We all got that check from the state of Indiana. The refund check, the sales tax refund.
Maybe, yeah.
I think it was
22, yeah.
Because it didn't matter how much money you made that year. Didn't matter anything. I think my wife and I, we got like $700 and something they combined it.
Sure.
And they sent us a check or whatever.
Right.
I mean, you could have been a kid and got paid your portion.
Right.
You know, as long as you paid anything into state income tax, you got this refund. The only reason that ever happened is because of inflation.
Right.
You know, so something goes from $1, the state collects 7 cents. Now that
Right.
thing's $2, they're collecting 14 cents. Now do that across the board.
Right. Yep.
Now we didn't get it in 2023 because they amended the Constitution of
Right.
the state.
Right.
So that money went somewhere else. Maybe it went to schools. Maybe it went to whatever. I don't
Right.
know. But that's how, like, so I almost feel like the Fed said, hey, there's too much money in Wall Street. There's too much money here. You know, we need to take the money out of the bank accounts. We got to get it in the people's hands. We got to get the interest rates higher. One, so that they can use it to come down. You know,
Right.
But as interest rates are up, our money's worth something.
Right.
It's nice to get some money in the bank account again.
Right.
You know, seeing interest and things like that.
Right.
So I don't think any of this is actually an accident.
No.
And I think, you know, this is the first step. And then they'll hit, like today, I want to say the job claims came out. It was better than expected. Something's coming out tomorrow. I forgot.
It always is better than expected, then it gets revised lower.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So then it's even worse.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So, you know, but as you watch, they'll eventually cut. But they want
Right.
things to get bad, and then they're going to cut. They always over tighten, and then they'll over loosen.
Yep.
Things will fire back up, and then instead of us hitting that Fed's fund rate of 5%, we're going to hit a fund rate of 6-7.
Right.
You know, somewhere in there.
Yep.
And then it'll get too tight, and then they'll come back down, but they won't come down to as low as they go to the time before.
Right.
So, like, say we end up at 4 and things fire up, it might go down to 5.
Right.
And then they'll go higher again.
Right.
You know, until they put the kibosh on. It took 36 years last time.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm curious what it takes this time. We'll have to
Yeah.
listen to this in 30 years and see where it's at.
There we go. Sounds like a plan.
That's fun.
Well, Brent,
Yeah.
I appreciate you hopping on. I know you have a busy day here too, so
Yeah. No, I appreciate you having me, man. This is fun.
we're going to do it again for sure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I appreciate it.
absolutely. Well, let the people know where can they find you if they want to get a hold of you.
My website is twgrealty.com, or you can text my cell, 219-406-7195. I service all Northwest Indiana, Porter Lake, LaPorte County, Jasper, Newton as well.
Perfect. Good deal. Well, Brent, thanks again for coming on, and I will catch you guys in the next episode.